Tap into the psychology of engagement and more. This is where we talk about life, learning, and everything in between. This is the Lifelong Podcast, a show for those of you who love to ask why. It's because we're marketers. It's because we're coaches. It's because we're change makers. Each week, we dive into the big questions and explore the psychology of engagement with strategies, tactics, and special guests along the way. Now, here's your guide, the visibility hacking queen herself, Coach Molly. Hey, visibility hackers, and welcome to this episode of the Lifelong Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Molly from visibilityhacking.com, and as per usual, it's an absolute pleasure to have you guys here with me for this episode. This season of the Lifelong Podcast, we are diving into the psychology of engagement. So if you're a marketer, if you are a course designer, course creator, if you are a digital coach, any of those aspects, you definitely want to be tuned in for this season, because these are the tools and strategies that a graduate level education has given me that I just want to share with you guys so that we can do better at what we do. Because if you design your course with tangible results in mind, then these tools and strategies are going to help propel you forward with that. Okay, this is all of this stuff today. We're talking about action learning, and it started with this guy here, Reg Revens, and he liked to look at how we learn through doing and what that actually looks like. So in his theory, it's L equals P plus Q. That's right. It means learning equals participation. It means problems plus questions. In his theory, he came up with the formula L equals P plus Q, where this means that learning, L, is equal to programming, or the things that you are taught, plus the questions you ask, P plus Q. And this is a great way to think about how people actually learn. So learning is accomplished by combining the knowledge you already have with the questions you need to ask to gain the knowledge you don't already have. It's pretty fantastic of a concept, I think. This later evolved into adding an extra R. So learning, we know, equals the programming or the knowledge that we learn plus the questions we need to ask plus R, which is reflections. That's having that space and time to reflect back on the experience of learning and to go actually write down and actually acknowledge where the learning has happened and what has caused it. So action learning is a process of insightful questioning and reflective listening. That's how we're able, so like when we're designing for our digital courses, if we think about using action learning theory in our course design, it means that we're creating space for either us as course facilitators, like facilitators of the experience. If we use the appropriate types of questions, we can help frame that learning experience. But it's also creating space for your students to ask those questions and for your students to create space where they are actively listening reflectively. They're asking the right questions and they're listening for those answers as well. So there's different steps in the action learning process. And the first step is to identify the problem. We've seen this as a recurring theme throughout different types of learning strategies and course design strategies, right? Identifying that problem is vitally important to actually moving forward with any learning process. Then we actually engage in action learning. And action learning has to do with us as the individual learning the skill and having the change, asking the right questions, etc. We have a moment where peers can learn from each other. And that's why when we build our communities, we make sure that we're not only creating space where our people are following and interacting with the attractive character, but we also create spaces and moments for our people to communicate laterally with each other as well. So there's this peer-to-peer learning moment. And then the third aspect of action learning is that our systems change based on how learning happens. So that's where we talk about having flexibility and the space to grow and change your own program based on the feedback that you're getting from your people. We're teaching this in every type of program that we're delivering. So that's what action learning it looks like. And then we actually go and we take that step. We learned about everything. We learned from different people. We learned in different environments. And now we actually go out and we take that action and we do that step. And then from there, we look back and we reflect back on the results. What actually happened? What were we able to accomplish? And there's different kinds of questions that we have to start asking within an action learning modality. We have to start asking the right kinds of questions that will lead to the right kinds of answers and the right framing of experience. We can't just sit there and ask why 1,000 times. Yes, that's an impactful question to ask multiple times to really drill down on something, but there are so many other types of questions that we need to be thinking about when we're trying to get information from the experience. And so the first type of questions that we're going to ask are closed questions. Questions that are pretty much a yes or no answer. These are really important. Do not discount these. When you're seeking information and you're trying to move through a system or check off a checklist, yes or no questions are really helpful in doing this quickly. Our computers, the way that we program computers is based on closed questions, where it's an if there's this answer or there's this answer, yes or no. This helps us move through information really quickly. The second type of questions that you should be asking are objective questions. These are questions that relate to how much something is. These are questions that relate to how much something is or how many of something there are. The third type of questions are relative questions, like when did something happen or where did something happen? We also have to ask questions that are open, and these are questions like why and how. These are questions that are going to elicit a much longer, more in-depth answer. We need short questions, like our closed questions at the beginning. And we also need these longer, more fleshed out questions as well. Having too heavily weighted in one of these categories will not give you the whole picture, will not give your students the whole picture. You need to be asking all of them. And then finally, the final type of question are generated questions, questions that are actually inspired by your students themselves. When they start going in flow and they start going really truly into the questions that just naturally are coming out of them because they're genuinely curious in the process. Those are the best kinds of questions. So we need to make sure that as course designers, we're creating and utilizing these different question types, but we're also creating space for our students to start asking those questions as well. When they're able to do that, that helps in the reflective process. So that is action learning. It's quick, it's simple, and it's all based on the questions we ask and really our ability to listen for those answers. It's through the reflective process of looking back and going, what worked, what didn't, and how can I get more information next time? It's in that process that we're able to really level up each time we learn a new task. It's not just acquiring tools for your toolbox, it's so much more. Thank you guys for joining me for this episode of the Lifelong Podcast. This season, it's all about the psychology of engagement. So if you have enjoyed this episode, I would highly ask your favor if you would be able to leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you enjoy us on, or to make sure that you're subscribed to our YouTube channel if you're watching us in video format. A bunch of you guys are watching, but you're not subscribing, so I'm curious. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'm Coach Molly from visibilityhacking.com. I will see you on the next episode. And until then, remember, I love you, and be excellent to each other.